Welcome back, everybody, to our Gospels in a Year, and so good to have you with us. We are at the book of Luke. If you're not up to the book of Luke, that's all good. We've got Matthew and Mark and the start of Luke all back in the catalogue. You can go back and watch that. But we are up to the second part of Luke. What I mean by the second part of Luke is that Luke was written by Luke, who was most likely a proselyte. You know, he was a Gentile who became a Jew, and he's writing it to Theophilus, or the friends of God. And so it's written in three parts. Part one, the introduction. Part two, Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. And part three is Jesus in Jerusalem. Basically the triumphal entry and the death and resurrection of Jesus. So we are up to the third part of part two of Luke. So we've done the intro and we're just coming to the end of part two. Next week we'll transition it into part three. So what I want to do is I want to jump in at Luke chapter 17, and I'm going to read some bits from Luke 17, and let's just go from verse 1 to 10. Jesus said to his disciples, "Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. So watch yourselves. If your brother or sister sins against you, rebuke them, and if they repent, forgive them. Even if they sin against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times back to you, saying, 'I repent,' you must forgive them." All right, so Jesus is talking to his crew about forgiveness. Forgiveness is key. Doesn't matter. 7 times they do the same annoying thing. 7 times they come and stuff you around. 7 times, but they come back each sentence every time, even if it's 7 times every day. If they repent, you must forgive them. And I love the disciples' response. The disciples' response is, well, then you're going to need to increase our faith. Basically what they're saying is, that's a hard ask, Jesus. What you're asking, that's just too hard. I need more faith. I need more faith. If you're going to ask me to keep forgiving people over and over and over again, gonna need some more faith. And Jesus' response is this: if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree or this sycamore tree or this fig tree. Now, just again, context, this particular tree is a very deep-rooted tree. It's a tree that's roots run deep and wide and interconnect, and this is a sort of a big deal. It says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, "Be uprooted and planted in the sea," and it will obey you. So Jesus' response, if you like, is forgiveness is not a faith issue. I think that's really fascinating. Jesus goes, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how much people are ticking you off, if they ask for forgiveness, every time you need to forgive them. And the disciples go, but we don't have enough faith for that. And Jesus' response is, it's not a faith issue. Even the smallest amount of faith can remove a deep-rooted, deep-seated issue that you've got going on. And so he uses this analogy. He says, suppose one of you has a servant ploughing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, "Come along now and sit down to eat"? Won't he rather say, "Prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink"? Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? No. So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, "We are unworthy servants, we have only done our duty." This is almost one of the more harsh things that probably Jesus actually ever says to his disciples. Very straight, very whatever. Forgive people no matter what. We don't have enough faith for that. It is not a faith issue. It's a way of life issue. If you want to enjoy life, he goes, hey, does the servant rule the master, or does the master rule the servant? In other words, you are the master. Don't let the unforgiveness be your master. The eating and sometimes we think, if we hold on to that, I'm not going to forgive, and I love it. I'm enjoying this anger. I'm enjoying this. And I just hope they get theirs. And we sort of think that that's where the eating and drinking and joy and life to the full comes from. And just go, that's not where it comes from. You are the master, not that issue. You are the master, not the unforgiveness. Don't let unforgiveness master you. You are its master. And if you forgive first, the joy comes second. If you forgive first, the the merry and the life to the full will come second. If you forgive first and you master your forgiveness, then the party comes second. And then he sort of goes on to go, basically, the way I would sort of translate it or interpret it is he basically goes, and at the end of the day, forgiveness is actually not a big deal. Forgiveness is not a favor to God that you just go and, okay, God, for you. You know, God doesn't need you to forgive. It's not a favor to God that you forgive. It's not an obligation to God that you forgive. Basically what Jesus is saying is God knew how he created you. God knew how he made you, and he did not make you to live in unforgiveness. So forgive, not because you have to, not because you should, not because you're doing God a favor, not because it ticks some sort of religious box, but because it's what you should do. To live in joy, to live in life to the full, to live in the kingdom of heaven right now, you need to live a life of forgiveness. And in fact, it's actually not a big deal. It's actually not well, look at me, I forgave this person, aren't I, whatever. And he goes, no. Think about it more from this perspective. Don't think of it from the perspective of, woohoo, aren't I amazing? But I'm just an unworthy servant, and I'm just a person. I'm just doing the best I can with what I've got, and what I can do is forgive. And I reckon that's kind of pretty cool. So that's something that maybe you've read and looked over and wonder what that means, but it goes on more. And I reckon this is a fascinating chunk of Bible. We're going to read just a little bit more. So another really fascinating bit is found in the next chapter, in chapter 18. And it's from verse 9 to 14. So let's read that, and I want to talk about that just for a second. And it says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. I actually think this is a really interesting chunk of Bible, because the way it's very easy to read it like this. It's very easy to read it like, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you I'm not like other people. And I'm not like that guy over there. I actually don't think that that's the tone in which Jesus would have read it. Maybe it was, but it's not the tone I read it with. I actually think this guy, this Pharisee, this prayer is actually a very self-aware, almost humble-ish kind of prayer. I don't think he's going, God, I just thank you I'm not like that dirty, rotten scoundrel over there. I think it's this guy going, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. You have blessed me. I am a blessed person. I don't rob. I'm not doing evil. I'm not an adulterer. And even this tax collector, I don't do the things that this tax collector does. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all I got. I think this guy is actually really grateful for what he does. I think he is really grateful for the blessing that God has in his life. But the problem that, if I can say it this way, the problem that Jesus seems to have with him is, even though the posture of his heart might be, look, I'm just so thankful that I've been blessed, is that gratitude did not move him to act any differently. So he's going, like, you know, it's like, maybe you could say it this way, God, I'm just so blessed. I'm so grateful that you've blessed me with this, you know, with 3 houses and 2 cars and a full bank account. I don't deserve it, but God, you are just awesome and you have blessed me. But if that blessing doesn't transform my heart and transform my actions to go, now I'm going to use this blessing, I'm going to use this for your kingdom's purpose. I'm going to use this in order to not just live in your blessing, but to use that blessing, that I'm going to be a conduit for your blessing, that I'm going to be a conduit. See, there's nothing wrong with having the stuff. And there's nothing wrong with being grateful that God has blessed you, because he has, and we should be grateful. But it seems to me that the issue that Jesus has in this story is not that the guy was blessed, not that the guy did well, not that the guy understood and was self-aware that he did well, but it was that blessing did not move him to want to bless others. You know, we can have all the stuff and that's okay. Now, if we're arrogant about it and exalt ourselves that way, that's obviously a problem. But another way that we kind of exalt ourselves is, yes, we might humbly be grateful for the blessing that God has given us, but it doesn't move us to use that blessing in order to bless others. And so I reckon that's kind of cool, because sometimes we don't read it that way, do we? Sometimes we're like, oh, I'm so much better than that guy. And maybe that is what he was saying, but I don't think so. I think what he was saying is, and so I think for us, this, out of those sort of two chunks of Bible, there's a lot of questions that we could ask ourselves. Like out of that second one, we could ask ourselves some questions like, number one, are we grateful for the blessing that God has for us? But then as a result of that, does that move us to want to use the blessing that God has given us to bless others so that they too can be blessed? Or do we just want to sit and, like Scrooge McDuck, and just swim around in our piles of gold, Or because it's great that we understand and are grateful to God for our blessing, but are we actually then using that to move the kingdom forward? Are we actually using that blessing in order to bless others? And then maybe what's a harder question to ask might be, how are we going with forgiveness? Because Jesus made it really clear that forgiveness is not a faith issue. It's actually a life to the full issue. It's actually a joy issue. It's actually a God knows how he created you, and he didn't create you for unforgiveness to be your master. So maybe they're the two questions. Question number one is, are we not just aware of the blessing of God, but are we using the blessing of God in order to be a blessing? And number two, do we have areas in our life of unforgiveness that we need to bring forgiveness into those areas? And I think they're kind of interconnected, because maybe a better way to say it would be, are we aware that the blessing that we have is enough? That we can actually we're so blessed, we can let go of that person, we can let go of this unforgiveness, we can let go of this bitterness. But either way, I think they're very cool chunks of Bible. So that brings us to the end of the second part of Luke. Next week, we're going to transition into the third part, which is the triumphal entry, and then the third part of Luke, which is the death and resurrection of Jesus and whatever. So which is going to be very, very cool. Spend 3 or 4 weeks there. So with that being said, have the most amazing week, and I will see you next week.